Hello to everybody. We're letting people in. Good morning to the world. It's your last morning. You could start putting where you're from in the chat box if you want to. It's nice to see where people are from. If anybody feels like joining in the chat box, just saying where you're from. We have all the C's checking in. Carrie Ann and Courtney. Robin from Greensboro. Yay, Greensboro. Boone, Caldwell Council, Smart Start of Mecklenburg. A lot of North Carolina there. Hello, Erica. I'm from Durham as well.
All right. It looks like the waiting room is empty. So we will continue to let people in, but we'll go ahead and get started. I want to just say good morning. Thank you all for attending the Smart Start Conference. This is our final day of the conference. It was unfortunate that we weren't able to host in person, but we are grateful that we've had the opportunity to connect virtually this year. We just want to remind you to mute your microphone during the workshop so that everybody can hear the speaker, and there may be opportunities for you to come off mute and participate throughout the presentation. So I want to just remind folks that there will be a raffle and a survey that will wrap up this session, and I will turn it over to Jean and Jonathan to do their introduction.
All right, good morning. Hello, everybody. This is Jean Allen. I am here with Jonathan. We're going to talk to you today about making, measuring, and monitoring board diversity goals and actions. A couple of different ideas we're going to share from our different perspectives, kind of hands-on practical ideas. So this is our introduction. I am a consultant. I work with small and medium-sized nonprofits around board development and diversity. I also teach in the Duke University Nonprofit Management Program, and I am a board source certified governance trainer. Actually, they've changed the title now to governance consultant, with the idea being that I like to bring a lot of board source material, which I know a lot of y'all are familiar with. How about you, Jonathan?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Mahar-Sayas. I am from Rochester, New York, although I'm calling to you from today from Las Vegas. I just finished a conference up here as well, so it's 7 a.m. for me, so pretty exciting, but I'm so honored to be with you today. I work full-time for a nonprofit based in Rochester called Villa of Hope. I'm the Director of Community Engagement, and then I also serve on the board of a couple organizations, but mostly my main role is on the AFP Global Association of Fundraising Professionals Global Board. So coming today, sharing ideas from my professional and board experience perspective, and happy to be working with Jean. And this is our second year presenting together. So we're excited to come back to the conference and build on that as well. So thanks for having us.
So I'll do a little bit of bragging on Jonathan. He presented at the AFP conference. Those of you who don't know, it's the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and he is on the board as part of their focus in bringing in different voices to the board. So he got that after we presented here last year. I don't know if that's connected. No, maybe, I'm just kidding. You know, you presented
maybe.
here.
We do have the most diverse board we've ever had in history now, and we're saying that and committing and building on that as well.
Excellent. So what we're going to talk about with you today, we've kind of divided our ideas up into three areas. One is the idea of strengthening the foundation of what's happening with your board. The second one is moving from learning to action. And then the third is identifying options for accountability. We're going to go through a couple of ideas that we have, give you some examples from inside nonprofits, as well as just really strange ideas, because sometimes things that are way outside the box make it look at things differently. We're going to do some chat box conversations and some breakout groups as we can with the size of the group. So just work with us. We'll have a good time. as I said, we're going to start with strengthening the foundation. So the first thing we want you to think about is the idea of how do you create a sense of urgency? This comes straight out of just change models that say people have to feel a sense of urgency. Otherwise, they never get around to it. So urgency could be we need to do it now. Urgency could be why we need to do it. But just, it's not about a negative sense of urgency, but it's about motivating people through kind of with deadlines, through why we need to do this now versus 5 years from now. So the idea is making it real for people. One of the ways we recommend for you to do that is to think about what's your case for diversity, inclusion, and equity. It's many of us come from one spot that's very important from our heart, from our spreadsheets, from wherever it is, but part of it is learning to communicate that and get your board to find where they can talk to what the case is. So what we're focusing on today could apply to staff, but mostly what we're talking about is working with a board and how to move your board into some leadership roles in your community or leadership roles within your organization, looking at diversity, inclusion, and equity. I'm going to share with you a couple of statements. What I want you to do is think about which one of these statements would resonate with you as a leader or resonate with you as you talk to your board or even some of your board members. So I'm just going to go through a series of statements here. So board diversity is important. And what I'm going to suggest is you could take something like this and share it with your board and then have them pick the one. Each member could pick the one that resonates with them. You could have a discussion. If everybody kind of rotates towards one or the other, that's something you could work with. So the idea is all of these are important statements, but you can't really grab everything. You need to grab one statement for you personally or help your board because that kind of helps you build that case. So the first statement is individual leaders who compose a nonprofit board are a reflection of the values and beliefs. So it's about representation, values and beliefs, and that you're making the most important decisions. And that's something that you think is true. Second one is we can better achieve our mission if we have the perspectives of a range. So this is more about, first one is more about representation for good decisions. And this one's more about the perspective of a broader and diverse range of leaders, the diversity of viewpoints that come from different lived experiences and different backgrounds. The third one is kind of want to respond to what's happened in the last couple of years between 2020, 2021, 2022. There's been kind of a amplification of the need for greater knowledge about all these issues. Some people who felt like they were pretty confident in talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity issues might have had some rethinking in the past few years, watching some of the events unfold. So that could be the motivating factor for some people is this is my why, this is my now, because I'm looking around going, wow, things aren't where I thought they were. So for some people that may resonate. And the last one is the idea of the need for self-examination. This is kind of the continuous improvement idea that we need to continually learn about the needs of our community. We need to be able to influence what goes on because we're in leadership positions. So we need education and self-examination. So I'm going to share with you all of these in one spot, and we're going to try something. We're going to see if we can do this with the annotations. I've been on Zooms lately where the annotations didn't work. So for annotations, what I want you to do is put a mark in the square next to the statement that's the most relevant for you. And the way we get to annotations is you go up where you say you're viewing Jean Allen's screen. And next to that, it says view options. And then if you click on that, you should see annotate. Is that working? Do you see it, Jonathan?
Yes, and people can do like a stamp for a check mark or an X or something for a star.
Yeah, pick something perfect. So we just,
there we go.
Yep. So pick the one, just a chance to get you to annotate. Maybe you've used that tool. Thank you, Jessica, in the chat box. Jean Allen's screen, view, annotate. And then under annotate, you can pick stamps or stamp. And what's kind of cool is if you do it quick, it's anonymous, so we won't know where you put yours. So it's a tool you could use if you're not being able to get in there. Go up to where it says you're viewing Jean Allen's screen, and then view, and then annotate. So I'll give you about 20 more seconds, see if people can get in. I don't know if anybody's trying to get in and can't. Unfortunately, we can't see that piece. This is actually working pretty well. We weren't quite sure if annotations would work. You never know. You try these things. So clearly what I'm seeing is a lot of people here feel like number 2 is important. We better achieve our mission if we bring in perspectives and we have a diversity of viewpoints. And so I would say that becomes in some ways your why. You could use a statement like that to start a conversation with your board, or you could ask another board member who has a different point of view to talk about why that one is matter to them. So the person who picked number 3, that the current events of the last couple of years have brought out greater knowledge, that might be their call to action. So part of this is understanding we all have different calls to action. And while clearly a lot of us today in this group feel like number 2 is a strong one, I've shared this with a variety of groups, and people have very different feelings of where they fit, as you can see here, even though one group dominates. Anything you want to add to this, Jonathan?
No, just emphasize the fact that every board's on a different journey, so different statements will resonate differently with it as well, and identifying what works best for your board or even specific board members to get them motivated and get them ready to kind of tackle these issues is a great tool to kind of create some urgency as well.
All right, so I just took a picture of that so I can save it, because what I'm going to have to do now is go into annotations and clear it, which means don't anybody go in there and do anything, or we'll have to go back and clear it again. So I'm clearing. Anybody else? You done? 3, 2, 1. I'm going to clear all the drawings. All right. Oops, I got to get back to my mouse. Okay. So then I want to share, so you'll have these statements. Part of that is sharing the slides out. So you'll have these statements as a way to have a conversation. The reason I think these statements are useful, because by putting 4 statements out there, you're giving people some different pathways. You're not saying this is our only call to action, or this is our only critical reason. You're letting people kind of hook into what matters to them, because it's all moving people forward, but it allows the people who feel like a different statement gets them going to kind of have a hook as well. So you'll have all these statements, and we advise using them to have conversations with your board, or getting your board chair to lead the conversation. So I want to talk about, this came from Board Source. They do reports and studies, and they look at diversity on boards. So they looked at how does the board's current level of diversity impact different actions that the board can do. So I'm going to share with you those actions, and just not share with you what came out nationally, because I think what's more important about this is for you to talk to your board and say, how do you think this is impacting us? So the first 3 would be, how does the board's current level of diversity impact your ability to access donor networks? Number 2, cultivate trust with your community. How does your current level of board diversity help you attract and retain top talent for your board? So something to start thinking about is, I know a lot of people who I have met who are younger, maybe in their 30s and 40s, people who Jonathan would know more than me, perhaps. Jonathan talks about this. He's gathered with people where they are only, I mean, this is what you told me, Jonathan, people want to be on boards where there's diversity, and that's something they look for. And that's something Jonathan looks for, because that's what interests him. The next one, 4, 5, and 6, enhance the organization's standing with donors, which is a little different than expanding your networks. Number 1, understanding how best to serve the community, understanding your current operating environment, which goes back to how everything's changing. And then 7, 8, and 9, strengthen what you're doing, be able to plan effectively and attract and retain top talent for the staff. So the study was, how does the board's current level of diversity impact these? The way I would suggest is you could look at this and narrow down. Sometimes what we tend to do is have the business case or the case for diversity that's all over the place. And so you have a statement we just talked about, and now to pick 1 or 2 or 3 of these that are, what are going to be your anchor that you want to build your diversity on in terms of board diversity? What are the values? What are the statements you want people to be able to understand? So what we're going to do is poll, and here's what the poll is going to say. But I'm going to just read it to you first. It's going to say, what are the costs to you of not being diverse, inclusive, or equitable from your opinion? And here are your 5 choices. So I'm going to put this up here as a poll now and give you a chance to indicate it, and you'll have all the same words as on the screen. It's just sometimes smaller to read. So what are the costs to your nonprofit of not being diverse? What do you see? Okay, we've got half of you moving quickly. People are still voting in, still putting their numbers in. They're still coming in, so let's see. Yes, I see that some people might not have turned off annotate. We're getting lots of check marks on the screen.
We're just having fun, Gene. That's what the point is.
So
Continue the fun.
yeah, I think it's quite attractive to have all those on the screen. Makes it fun. Some of you are, I think, still somehow in, you need to go and, I don't know how you leave annotation. I've never had that trouble getting stuck there. So I'm
I
not
think
sure.
there's a check box at the end of the annotation option that you can exit out.
Well,
Or we'll just see lots of hearts and stamps.
well, I can get rid of them. I can get rid of them in a minute. I just can't get rid of them while I'm doing the poll.
Oh, yeah, of course. No
Yeah.
worries.
Okay, so let's see. I'm going to, people are still answering. So let's do, how about 5 more seconds? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll. We got about 80%. So that's pretty good. And I'm going to share the results. So this is what y'all said. Interesting. Delivery of your services is what you see would be your biggest cost. What wasn't so high was attracting and retaining the board members that you seek. So you don't see that as being a cost. Clearly, attracting and retaining staff members was a little higher, impacting your organization's reputation and delivery of your services. Again, part of what we're doing today is we want to model for you conversations you can have with your board. So I think you could do a survey like this and ask your board members, ask your staff members, ask key members of your community what they think would be important. Use your own data versus, board sources, national data. Who cares? Use your data. Use some of these same questions and talk to your people. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And let's see if I can get back to the annotations. I can do that in just a second. One other thing I wanted to talk about when we're talking about the sense of urgency is also the idea of looking at how you work with your vendors. So you can consider evaluating vendors, who you spend your money with, what are your vendors' goals? If you're doing a food event, can you go to a local small entrepreneur for the food, or do you have to go to the highest bidder? I mean, the lowest bidder. So you might want to talk to your board in that sense, because maybe you want to spend a little more, but you're spending your money in the community where you want to have connections. Talking to your funders, some of them have high standards of what they want, some of them don't. So you can have conversations there. So you're impacting kind of the upstream part of your business as well as what you're doing. And in just a minute, Jonathan's going to talk about organizational statements, but the idea is the strength of having a statement, not just for having the words, but for being out there and saying this is what we're about. What we're going to do now is I want you to pick a picture. I want you to pick a picture that speaks to you about leading the DEI focus at your nonprofit. Don't want you to say anything about it. Just want you to pick a picture. What we're going to do is put you in a real quick 3-person, how many people we got here? 2 or 3 person breakout group, and see what you think about it. See what you think about when you're in your breakout groups. So you can go ahead and join. If you're here, you have a chance to join your group. Thank you, Jessica, for putting that word. So Jessica, how long did you put them in the rooms for?
We can put them however long you need. So just let me know how long and I can send a broadcast message to folks.
Okay, so let's do 30 seconds more and then close it out. If you're sitting here, folks, and just popped in, we're doing a breakout group. We're going to end it very quickly. In 52 seconds. Some of you are just coming in. We're finishing a breakout group. Some of you have already left your breakout group. We have 10 seconds. We'll have everybody back. I think we're all back now. Everybody back. It was a kind of an interesting way to get you to connect. I know at conferences, that was the fun part, is getting to chat with people. So we wanted to build some of that in there. I'd like to hear in the chat box, what was something that you either said or heard in there? You could just put the number and what people said. Just want to hear some of the comments. You can put number 6 and why you said that or why you heard that. Number 5. We'll see if we can get a few comments going in the chat box and then we'll see what people said. It's kind of interesting because I hear people pick all of them when we do this from really different reasons. Is everybody, am I putting anything? There you go. So Sherry says it's number 6 because lots of pieces that work together. In Jane's group, everybody said number 2, which was stacking the rocks, kind of keeping the right balance is what I hear from people. Brittany's talking about having more perspective. Thank you for y'all being willing to put your comments in there. Number 1 is from Tiffany because she works with Partnership for Children and it makes her think of early education. And Debbie's saying number 5 because of urgency. Yes, people kind of interpret these a whole lot of different ways. April, keeping it colorful, ensuring all populations are represented. So Jonathan, let's move on to the next one.
All righty. I love hearing just different interpretations of everything. It makes it exciting. So the second kind of strategy we had for kind of moving forward on your board diversity goals is creating a vision. So we wanted to think about two, we just mentioned puzzle pieces here, but like there's a bunch of pieces in the kind of at your organization at play, related to your programs, your board, your staff, the community, and they all can come together to kind of work on creating like a vision of where you're going for your organization. And creating a vision statement can kind of help build on what your organization can look like to kind of get people motivated, get them moving forward, set them a direction as well, leverage it for recruiting, leverage it for connecting with the community, leverage it for building some retention pipelines as well. So it's a great tool to kind of think about too. And that's why we have our organizational vision statements too, but we got to think about also having a DI vision of where we want our organization to move forward to DI as well. So we have some sample organizational statements too. So this is a one at my current organization. So this was created before I came on board, but I've leveraged it for many things as well. But you see here too, this is where we're striving to kind of build on as well. So our vision is that we are a multicultural and anti-racist organization. We strive to build greater understanding of our community systems to touch, we call it DIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. But you see here is our vision statement, and we have that at staff orientation. We have that at board orientation. I put it in funding proposals because I also do our grant writing too. And I get our donors and funders involved as well. It's a great motivator and direction for us to kind of see where it is. And you'll see here, we have like a graphic of like all our organizational goals and values and culture, and DIB is part of that too as well. So it's kind of connected as part of the whole integrated picture and kind of thinking about what we're doing as well. But that's kind of where we're kind of focusing on too as well. And then we're using tools to assess our continuum of getting to that place as well. And then Jean, move forward on the next one. This is the Royal Shakespeare Company. And we shared this because there's 3 different DI vision statements that they have that could be connected and leveraged as well. And that's kind of why we want to share some different examples. So one, they have a business case for diversity. So, they're mentioning audiences are changing, and we recognize that our loyal supporters are already expect the best practice in diversity and inclusion. So this is the business financial expectation, like what you all mentioned, delivery of services. This is probably it. Like if we're trying to be fiduciary and smart with our resources, we need to make sure that we're being best with DI. The second is the creative case. So this is, I would say, more of a strategic type of case as well. So more diverse programming means more diverse audience, has more diverse appeal, gives us the opportunity to kind of connect with more people as well. I'm sure many of you with your organization, you want to connect with more people. You want to help more as well. And if we think about creating a vision statement that helps connect to a wider variety of people, you're going to have a variety of supporters, board members, and people you serve as well. And then the last one is the moral case. So this is just more like, this is why we believe is right of what they mentioned. So, they're in significant receipt of public and private investment. We have an obligation to kind of connect with the community as well. So it's important to kind of acknowledge that part as well. So we shared this one because it's just 3 different types of statements, because different board members might resonate with different types of statements or different kind of connections. So the different perspectives of doing that. And some of you, if you're kind of working with governance, there's 3 modes of governance that different boards operate. So like in these different cases cater to the different modes of governance. So the first one is fiduciary. So those governance that focus on spending our resources well. The second one is strategic mode. So how we can be competitive and the most strategic. And the third one is generative. So how can we as just an organization contribute and enhance our community and build the impact as well. But another type of example just to use to kind of get people motivated. And then another one we have, this is a Columbia Land Trust. They're in Washington State. And they wanted to kind of recognize that they are traditionally not, as people assumed, a DI organization, although DI affects all organizations as well. But they wanted to kind of just mention that too, because as a nature organization, they still have a mission to kind of do equity and justice. So this is kind of catering to those board members. They're like, we don't have to care about DI as much. I know that's probably not happening because you're here, but some of them have to navigate. So we got to just prepare as well. So we kind of they mention that, and then they mention what they're specifically committing to as well. So it kind of translates not just having a statement, but just having actionable committed areas to kind of get people motivated, because a statement is great, but you'll have some people be like, well, what are we going to do about it? What's the next steps? What are we kind of building on that? So here are 3 different areas. I think they have a bunch of other commitments too, but 3 we just picked out as well. So we mentioned, actively supporting policy priorities, being more representative of our community as well, and then serving as a resource for other conservation groups. So kind of making that translatable action to specific commitments so that people feel like, okay, I see where they are, I see where their journey, and I see what they're doing to get there, and I want to be on board with that as well. So those are just different types of organizational statements that you can just leverage for your, to kind of build. It could be an activity for your board of like what works to create a vision statement for our organization. And then people see that, and you can communicate it on your website, in your materials, in your donor materials, in your program materials too, just so people feel like, okay, they're beyond just talking about it. They've made a commitment, they have a statement, and they're kind of moving forward and kind of getting the building off the urgency to kind of take action.
Excellent. Now we're going to move to the next one, building a guiding coalition. If you think about working with your organization and working with your board to become a much more diversity, equity centered organization, you really are thinking about change. And one of the ideas around change is to have a change movement, is to have a guiding coalition. So the idea of a guiding coalition is to bring together some people from the different layers of your organization. Ask some board members, ask some staff members, give them some power and authority to help create more buy-in in your organization. What would be important is to get people who have respect from other people and find people who are willing to be transparent. And the idea is just they become your go-to team. They become your champions. You could call them your DEI champions, your advocates, but it's to create a group so that it's more than just one voice. And these aren't the people who are the most perfect, but these are the people who are just willing to take the chance or ask the questions or to explore kind of the circles and the outside the box. So it becomes your guiding coalition. And basically what you're thinking about is how do you establish buy-in? I want to take this apart a little bit and look at leadership versus management. If you're thinking about doing diversity, leadership work, management work, whether you want a board chair to be doing this or whether you're doing it yourself, would be the idea of leadership. The role of leadership is to inspire, to motivate, to ask hard questions. And all of you have done that at times when you have felt successful in leadership. And we just wanted to separate that out from the idea of management, because you need both of these. So management is the idea of accountability systems and role clarity. So they go together and they work really well. You can't just be the leader when you're talking about diversity. You need to have some of that accountability. You need to be able to have places where we're measuring what we've done, role clarity, who's doing what. But you can't just have the management systems because you need to have the inspiration. When you're managing change, it's important to have the management, but it's crucial to have the leadership. And part of having that guiding coalition could be having the leadership focus with that group. Somebody put in the comments, it'd be great to have family engagement too on the coalition. I mean, we're giving you these ideas. You take them wherever it fits for you, because I think that could be excellent in your organization if you have those relationships. It could be, I wouldn't necessarily call in lots of people from the community at this point, because what you're trying to do is build internal commitment. So I wouldn't necessarily go out to all the partners that you have. At the beginning, if you're trying to do a guiding coalition, I would want it to be people who are close into your organization so that there can be honesty and transparency and not a sense to have to showcase what you're doing. Because what you want to do is build internally first. But, if you have a good family engagement situation, sure, you can just think of these ideas. Again, we're sharing with you some statements or questions, because I think the best thing we can do in a 1 hour and a half workshop like this is to give you some tools to take out, give you some good questions to ask. So these are actually, I think these are some questions we found through Board Source. How can you deepen the conversation? And kind of like before, I'm going to have you look at them and then think which one would resonate with you. Which question would you think could lead a conversation with your board, just to kind of see where you are interested. But I would take these questions back to the board and I'd put them up and say, which one do you think we ought to talk about? And have people anonymously pick one. Like if they're in person, have them do dots. If they're on the Zoom, they can do annotate and pick a question that people are willing to talk about. Because some of these are more deep and more risky and some of these aren't. So let's look at the questions. First one is our reputation being negatively or positively impacted by our board's current composition? I mean, you want to go beyond just yes or no, obviously, but that's a good question. Might be something that your board could talk about, might be something that some people might feel comfortable with this one. The next one, if someone were to make assumptions about our organizational values based on our board composition, what would they think? You could ask your board members to come up with a statement of what would people think if they looked at our board's composition? What would they think we value? And you could take it deeper. Again, any of these that prompt you to think wider or deeper, go for it. We're just trying to make you have some tools here, give you some tools. Number 3, how well are we cultivating a deeper understanding of the community that we serve, or bringing their perspectives, needs, feedback into our strategic boardroom discussions? I think this is a great one to get boards understanding the urgency of now. Because part of what we've seen in the last 21, 22 couple of years is this is now. Some of us who have been thinking about diversity for a number of years are now looking at it differently than we used to. So part of this is just getting people to expand how they look at diversity and what's important. Number 4, are we at risk of making decisions without fully understanding how those decisions may impact those we serve or affect those we serve? And then the last question is, if we were to make a deeper commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity, what would that mean for our mission? And I would add to that, and what would that look like? So instead of you, the executive director, or you, the board chair, taking this back, have this conversation with maybe your team that you appointed, your guiding coalition, and have them think about this and have them bring that to a board meeting. If we were to make a deeper commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity, what would that mean for our mission? And what would that look like? And let the coalition, the guiding coalition, play around with that and then bring it back to you. So now I'm going to throw it back to Jonathan. Well, we could ask people, put in the chat box, which one of these, just by number, which one kind of jumps out at you, and one that you'd want to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just curious how people see these questions. So put in the chat box just the number. See a couple of 4s in there. It's open to everybody. You can put it in the chat box too. 3 and 4. A lot of 4s. So the way you would want to talk about number 4 is, I know this is written as, are we ever at risk? And people could say no, because you could change the question so it's a little more open-ended and say, how are we at risk of making decisions? Or if people say, are we ever at risk? Yes, say how. And if people say no, say how. So that's one way of working with this. I appreciate y'all putting that in there. I do see a lot of 3s and 4s. But just remember, I think these are all great questions. So you could think about, you could ask, like I said, your guiding coalition to take on one of these questions, or you could ask your board as a whole. We're going to move on now. Jonathan.
Okay, so we thought we'd throw in a challenge kind of question and stuff like that too, just to kind of get some brainstorming, figure out what we can best support you right now, and think about other ways. So the question is, what are the things that board members have said that have stopped or delayed your DI work? So we'd love to see it in the chat, but don't hit send. We're going to try something out, and just to kind of keep things going. So write your answer in the chat box, and then when I tell you, hit send, so that we'll see all the responses all at once and kind of building on that. So just put something in the next couple minutes, just something, what have they said? Like, what has impeded your efforts? What are some things that have stopped your progress, and kind of stuff like that. So just we can think about and kind of collectively brainstorm some ways that how you can respond and kind of navigate that. So put it in the chat, don't hit send yet. We'll tell you to hit send all at once, just so we'll see it all come together. But just think about specifically, like, has someone, and it could be a specific board member, it could just be some frustration. It could be something that a potential board member has kind of brought into as well. But like, think about specifically, like, what has had some stopped as well. So I'll give you just like 1 more minute just to do that, and then I'll let you know when we hit send, and then we'll review some of the answers as well. So, but hope your answers are getting ready. and we'll kind of build on that. So, as well. So, okay. Awesome. All right. So in 5 seconds, I'll count down, you hit send, and then we'll kind of read all the sentiments as well. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, hit send. Let's see what it is as well. And Gina and I will kind of pick out some of it as well. So awesome. All righty, Jean.
So I think what's jumped out at me when I look at this is the one that says the board is appointed, and we don't always get the persons who requested appointed to the board. So that's a challenging one. I still think you can have a conversation. You can talk about the values of your organization. Some of you might have, I don't think that's an uncommon. I think that's pretty common with a lot of the smart starts is you have appointed members. You still can create a guiding coalition because there might be people who are interested, and then you're creating that buy-in. Somebody who's appointed still might have an interest. I don't necessarily think that just because people aren't appointed mean they care more or less. So I think I do understand sometimes appointed people don't show up at the meetings in the same, they don't have the same commitment. I think you can still have a conversation. April talks about poverty is the issue, not race. When you want to have a conversation with your board and you start talking about race and people want to switch it to poverty, I think that's often a challenge for people, particularly people who live in a, like Alicia says, they don't see very much diversity in their community except maybe the economic diversity. So I think you start with where people are at and have that conversation and say, how do we look at how we need to be a different organization to embrace the diversity of the people we work with. We don't want a board that is not from the lived experience or aware of what's going on in our community. Or stop and say, what is it you're looking for? What's the diversity you're trying to create on your board? For some people, you might need to start with geography, making sure you represent your whole area. For some people, you might need to start with religious. I'm sure there's more than one religion in your community. They might all be Protestant, but you might have, I mean, I know people in Iowa and the Catholics and the non-Catholics, the Protestants didn't talk to each other there. So it's like, it's always kind of interesting what the difference is. You see me jumping out at you, Jonathan?
Someone mentioned not having a diverse community, and I think you kind of alluded a little bit at that as well, but I know you're sharing some tips later on how to rethink that specifically as well, because sometimes diversity is erased intentionally. So we have to kind of rethink how we approach it and rethink to say, well, no, we actually have this, and we kind of think about it. Maybe you're just not, we haven't opened our eyes to kind of leverage and kind of focus on what that is as well. And data could be a great way to kind of do that. But I wanted to point out some folks have had some positive interactions too. So it's great to see that too as well, that they haven't had too many, and it's kind of keeping that momentum and engagement going.
So there's a statement here from Carrie who talks about people are, they vote on stuff and they support it, but nobody wants to stand up when you ask for work. And that's true with almost everything. So it could be that you create a list of what are some of the tasks or actions that this board could take, and just have people brainstorm and make a list of all the tasks or actions, big, small. Think small. Sometimes small ones will get you going and build that momentum. So just create a list of all the tasks, all of the actions that a board or this board could do that would support diversity. So you brainstorm. And then you have people look through them, and you could either have them do dot voting and say, what are the top 3 that you think we as a group should do first? Or they could do voting anonymously through Google Docs. But the idea is to have anonymous voting. So we call out we have a brainstorm list that could be from really tiny actions to fairly significant actions. Then you have people vote on what they think this board should look at. Then you have people say, where do you feel comfortable? And I've actually done that with something around fundraising, where we have people move around the room and they made a list of what are the tasks a board could do around fundraising. And then we have them go stand in front of the list that they are the most comfortable with. And some of the list started out with very small pieces, but it got people engaged and they realized they were contributing. And I would do the same thing with diversity. But you come up with your own list. What are the tasks? We need people who can support the work. So what does support look like? We need people who can lead the work. What does leadership look like? And then say, where do you see yourself? But, you got to make sure people are willing to be honest. So you can do it anonymously, or you could do it that way. Anything else you want to add, Jonathan? Any other?
No, just to echo that point too. You just mentioned fundraising, like, determine, are they not stepping up for DI work or not stepping up for any work as well? And it just could just be like related to responsibilities, engagement, expectations, or could it be like comfort level with DI? So kind of helping assess that. And then, as you said, Jean, listing out responsibilities, providing support, getting some motivation, kind of helping, but kind of think about that too as well, just to kind of tailor the best kind of solution to what you're dealing with. So
one other I want to respond to, where it says the board member disagreed with our equity training philosophy. That could involve a one-on-one conversation. I mean, we live in a very broken world right now in terms of conversation. When I don't agree with you, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So it is very challenging, and can be very threatening. And you live in a community where you're having appointed people on your board, and some people are, as we would call, blue, and some people are called red, and that's the biggest divide some days in this community. So some of this might involve using that guiding coalition, finding the people who can help you move forward, and think of small steps. Don't think about changing the world. You're going to get there in a year or 2 or 5, but think of the small steps that a guiding coalition could help with, and they could bring information to meetings and you could talk. They could help lead conversations of people who disagree. But Kim put that in there, and I agree that can be very challenging. I'm sorry I can't give you really great answers here, but we'll think about that for the next workshop. But I do think that's a hard one right now because people disagree very strongly with each other about a lot of issues. All right, let's move on to moving from learning to action. This is our next category, a little more action. Here's the idea of enable action by removing barriers. Make it easier for people to be part of the diversity work. Make it easier for people to understand what you're doing. Sometimes people don't see the gray areas in this diversity work, and they feel like you either got it or you don't. And I got it, so why are you talking to me? When in fact, it's kind of a continuous growing, and wherever you are, there's always a little more you could learn. So one thing that I'm going to say is, it's important. This comes out in Board Source report. This comes out in a group called Equity in the Center. They've put out some reports, equityinthecenter.org. Both of them talk about the importance of having shared vocabulary. So you can pull stuff off Board Source and give it to your people, but then you're kind of pushing it in their head. You could come up with some words and say, how do we come together on what these words mean? How do we, so that when I use that word, you know what I'm talking about. So, I mean, I just put up a list of words that I've heard about here. I'm not going to go through all these, but create some words and just that you think are important for your organization to talk about, and decide how you're going to talk about them. I'm going to go into a couple of words here, just because I think these kind of start the conversation or move it deeper if you're already having that. But the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what do they mean? You might have your own definition. I'm just going to give you a pretty easy one here. Diversity is the way people are different. Equity is fair treatment and access for all. And inclusion is to make sure a variety of people have the voice and the power and the decision making. I mean, this is pretty simple, but if somebody's talking diversity and somebody else is talking inclusion, they could be having 2 very different conversations. And it's not about wordsmithing, and it's not about making people feel bad or good or correcting people. It's about being able to have a genuine conversation. So I wouldn't present this to people as, here's the words we're going to use from now on, but it's easier to have a conversation if we're using words in a similar way, so that when you're talking diversity, I know what you're talking about. And when I'm talking equity, I know what the organization's talking about. You've probably seen this picture. I think it's a very easy way, but I want to add something to it where it talks about the difference between equality, where everybody gets the same thing, and equity, where we give fairness to people. There are a lot of people who think equality is a very high, good thing, and they don't get equity yet because they think equality is really good. And if I'm one of those people and I think I believe in equal access, I believe in equality, and you come up to me and start talking equity, I might be either excited to learn something new or very frustrated because now I'm one down again. Now I don't understand. And yeah, you're just changing the language. So you need to know your people. But I think moving people to talking about equity from equality could be challenging, but you got to understand that people who use equality, they think that's a good thing. This picture to me has been very helpful in explaining this to people to help them see. I have an example I'll give, and I don't know if you have one, Jonathan. The example I like to share is what happened during the pandemic with school systems. And they realized not everybody, as you know, had access to internet at their homes. So they had to not treat everybody equally. They went into some of the neighborhoods where there were not as much likelihood of internet access, and put in school buses that had wireless abilities, and people could use the wireless through the school bus to get to the internet. So they could go into low income housing communities where there were a lot of people in a small area, and they could put the bus in a parking lot. So to me, that's where school systems decided equality isn't what we want. We need equity. Jonathan, I don't know if you had an example. We had talked about this, but I don't know if you remember what you had said to me. It was something from your organization.
I'm trying to think. The first thing that came to mind is like language access too. Like we have a lot of people who speak different languages, or it's easier to kind of communicate, or their parents might speak different language. So, printing everything the same way doesn't make it equally, but making things accessible in different languages or different types of language too ensure some equity and fairness in that, so people still feel engaged and feel like they have the opportunity to connect on that as well. So I wasn't sure if that was an example. That's the first thing that popped in my head right now.
Well, that works. So again, I'm going to share with you some ideas of why is it difficult to facilitate a conversation on race. Part of this is understanding yourself and where you see challenges. I would go to my guiding coalition and have them talk about this. It's just starting to get people to talk about why is it challenging. So there's 9 of these ideas. So the first 2 are people just want a quick fix. We want a quick fix for everything, but we want a quick fix. We just want this to be done with. But clearly, people don't want to be called a racist. I mean, sometimes we throw that word out there and people are like, I'm not a racist. So clearly people don't want to enter a conversation, because the way we keep defining things in this country right now is, if I don't agree with you, I'm a racist. If you don't agree with me. And so people just kind of throw out some words there. Number 3, it creates a lot of conflict for people, particularly in our deep divided country right now. Number 4 is people are at very different levels. So some of us are very confident or exposed to ideas, and some of us are very new to these ideas. The people on your board, you got a mixture of all these ideas going on. People are afraid to risk losing like a fool. Number 2, mixed in with having a different level of understanding. So you are kind of entering a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of frightening. Number 5, people use their own experience to develop meaning. And I see that a lot, particularly with the groups who are more likely to have power than the groups that don't, whether it's racially, whether it's gender, whether it's ability. The people tend to use their own experience to say, this is how other people are experiencing things, so that I understand what they're going through, when in fact, I might not. Now I'm going to show you another page. We've been socialized to not talk about race or to be colorblind. And there were people once upon a time where they maybe still as much as it used to be, where people said, I don't see race, which is meant probably from a good place, but it means I don't see you. And so it's actually kind of offensive. But to tell me, if I say, I don't see race, I think that's a good thing. So you have to work with me and help me understand that actually, if somebody came up to me and said, I don't see age, I don't see race, I don't see your anything, it's like, well, that's who I am though. You have to see me as a woman if you said you didn't see that. So, we have to work through that with people and talk about that. Some people think you can only talk about race in a shameful, blameful, or guiltful way. So we're telling all the reasons why this can be difficult. And then 8 and 9 is, I have identified myself perhaps in number 8 as somebody who has certain beliefs, and I think they are progressive, or I think they are useful, or I think they are important. And it's very hard if you challenge my beliefs. And then number 9 probably kind of sticks there, is the people who leave and don't say anything. And so you don't know what they're thinking. So these are all of them. What I wanted to just give you a sense of is, I would start with my guiding coalition and let's start talking about some of these and say, why is this challenging to us? Why would these be, which one of these do we need to start thinking about? And start with the people you're comfortable with. Start with your friends. A lot of this is we just got to learn to listen to each other and be uncomfortable. A lot of this is getting people who are willing to kind of take the risk and say, no judgment, let's just throw out some ideas and see where the conversation goes. So we offer this to you as kind of a list that you could use in talking with the people important to you in your organization and seeing where do you think you are? Where do you think other people are? Why is it challenging for you to start with? And it might be number 9 because you don't know what people are going to say and what they're not going to say. Some of this means moving more towards transparency and being honest with people and saying, this is where I'm coming from. I've been socialized not to talk about race. I've been socialized. The way I grew up was to be colorblind, and that was a higher standard. And I realize that doesn't work now. And that's not really a higher standard, but I've had to work my way through that. So that's kind of some of the transparency of looking at what you were socialized about. And again, I would go back to my guiding coalition and have start with them and have this conversation. Younger people might see it differently, but they're uncomfortable. Older people might see it differently. People who came through the 60s and 70s are going to see it differently than people who came through the 80s and 90s and people who are the young people now. So everybody kind of brings in their own value system to this. Back to you, Jonathan.
Awesome. Okay, so part of the moving to learning action is thinking about what are the actions that you're accomplishing, and then how can you celebrate them too as well. As we mentioned earlier, DI is a journey. It's a lifelong commitment. You're not going to happen overnight as well. So it could be daunting to be overwhelmed to accomplish it, but if you generate some short-term wins, that kind of can help build the momentum and keep your momentum going. So I wanted to share, this is kind of the 4 levels of oppression / racism. So there's different types of ways that oppression can show up in our lives and our organization and our community as well. So I just wanted to share this too, because you can think about different types of wins at the different levels. So the internal one is internalized kind of oppression. So that's internal with us. That's our thinking, our thoughts, our biases. That's focused more internally as well. Then there's interpersonal type of oppression. So how we communicate with others, how our relationships show up, how we connect with our staff, the people we serve, our conversations. That's kind of one level. And then there's institutional. So these are our organizational policies. These are the procedures we have in place, the priorities we set, how we budget, how we organize ourselves. And then there's structural, which is our community, like large system level policies, our kind of our sector issues, and kind of building on that as well. So I share that too, because you can think about wins at different levels of that with your organization. So like, you know, an internalized win could be a training on, oh, here we go, perfect. You know, internal is a training on privilege and bias for all staff and board. So how to get people thinking to hold themselves self-accountable to their action as well. And then it creates self-accountability. So that's a good kind of thinking about that, because we're our best selves to hold our best selves accountable, and to motivate people to hold themselves accountable to their actions and growing is a great kind of win as well. Then we have interpersonal wins. So like hosting a learning opportunity for group discussions, because as we share conversations and learn from each other, we need to leverage our diverse experiences from each other and learn from each other and how we can best embrace it as well. And then, yeah, just translating conversations to have at the DI, you know, the board level. Like, you know, a win could be like you had 3 conversations at board meetings about DI stuff that got people thinking, got people motivated. And you can track that and get motivated to ensure that you're having that and kind of building on that as well. And then you can have institutional wins too. So you can review all your policies and make sure you have inclusive language. That includes removing any racial stereotypes, having gender neutral language in all your policies as well, making sure your policies are accessible for everyone at your organization too, and they don't have too much jargon that people can understand as well. Or other ways too, like posting salaries on job postings. There's research that shows that women and people of color have been discriminated by not having job salaries on job postings too. And AFP, we came out and said, you can't post on our job board unless you have a salary. So that's one way to commit to say, like, it's an institutional action, it's a procedure and practice, but you can kind of leverage and say, this is what's important for our organization, how to build on that as well. So those are just different types of wins that you can think about and celebrate and kind of build on as well. And I see a comment from Carrie about being transparent. Transparency is great, you know. It is a driving value for a lot of people, and transparency helps connect with that too, and it kind of helps things move forward and kind of build on that. So some examples of some short-term wins that you can kind of think about as well. And then I think I was just going to share some board specific wins too that you can think about, because you could have wins related to different elements of the board development process. So one, recruiting wins. You can recruit underrepresented people to your board and celebrate that. They're on your board. That's great. They're excited. They're welcome. You know, celebrate that win too. Or a retention is you moved someone from an underrepresented group to a board leadership position, or they took over a committee role. That's a great celebration to kind of acknowledge and build on that as well. I told you and mentioned at AFP, this is the year we've had the most diverse board in our history of the organization. And we, at our conference, we're celebrating that, we're embracing that, and we're continuing our momentum too as well. People feel motivated and see themselves finally in there as well. You can have a policy, so changing a policy too. So for example, a lot of board giving policies can sometimes inhibit board diversity. So changing policies that restrict certain giving levels or have certain expectations, or you can think of access wins too. So like having your meetings at times that any board member can go, or supporting board members with childcare if you're engaging families, is supporting that as well. Or if you're having virtual meetings and you have individuals who have hard of hearing, having live captions in your meetings just to make things accessible as well. So just some ways to think about examples of wins, because then you can, the work's not done, but you should celebrate your progress and build on that too. And it can kind of keep that momentum going and keep you motivated and engaged to kind of move forward on some of those goals.
Great. We have another challenge question.
Awesome. So the challenge question for this is, what if I make a mistake? Like what happens? What if you make a mistake specifically, and build on that as well? And Jean, we're going to do another Chatterfall thing, correct here?
Sure, we can see what people have to say. We can, we're curious, we were just curious what stops you? And because sometimes it's what if I make a mistake? So we want to know, how does that stop you? Does it make you not want to have the conversations? I know for me, what would get in the way is the idea that if I'm the leader, I don't want to make a mistake in front of people. So it's the idea of how do we present this in a way that's ever growing, and that even though I'm the leader of the organization or I'm the board chair, I'm learning. I'm in a position where I want to get better. I'm not there yet, or I'm the executive director. And I know it's harder for an executive director to make a mistake when it's talking, to say something and then have people react in such a way. I would think if I make a mistake stops me, what I'd want to do is build it in that we expect mistakes. The whole idea of the fail fast concept, which is where get out there, make your mistakes, and acknowledge that's where we have to go, because there is not a perfect way. This is about dealing with other people. So we're open to people putting something in the chat box if you have either a suggestion for what to do to get around what if I make a mistake, or a situation that you have had. Just kind of open moment here. And instead of a Chatterfall, we'll just have you put it in if you have an idea. We'll see if anybody wants to add to the conversation.
Sure, as well. I know for me, Jean, I think it's just, mistakes are inevitable. Like we're not perfect, and we shouldn't take that hard, but we should learn to really apologize and genuinely feel like, how can we, generally apologize for a mistake, understand what the impact was, but then how can we commit to a behavior change or changing things so that we're growing from that as well? Because everyone's growing, everyone's made mistakes, and it's the way you respond to your mistakes that shows good leadership or good commitment to DI.
So somebody like me feels like I might say something that could offend somebody like you, Jonathan. So what would happen to you if I said something that offended you? How would you deal with that? Would you come up to me personally?
It depends. I mean, one, we trust each other, and usually if I trust someone, I wouldn't mention like, hey, Jean, that was really uncomfortable for me, and this is why as well. Could you try using, a different term or saying it in a different way, just so I feel a little bit more included in that. So I might say that to you as well. And I like the calling in instead of calling out. So like Jean said that in a group, I might pull her aside and say that as well, because I know Jean and I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable, because then you call people out and they get defensive. It could be a great way to call them in and be like, hey, by that time you did this, this could be improved as well. And it's a great way. And I share that too when I'm working and stuff like that too. So I say, here, call me in. Like, if you have a comfortable, you can email me, we can set up a time to chat, we can build on it, call me in to, have that set up, because I know I get defensive sometimes, and other people too, because you're just reacting to different things. So helping kind of communicate that so that people feel that they're learning and they're growing, and then they're committing to that behavioral change too. Oh no, did we lose Jean? I think we did.
I think we did too. I'll let her back in as soon as I see her.
Okay, well, I apologize for that. We'll wait for Jean. We'll just kind of look at some of the comments just to keep things going as well. I was nervous it was me because I saw her frozen too. But so while we wait for Jean to come back too, I love the positivity. Like, yeah, we lean into mistakes. So thanks, Jane, for sharing that too, of just saying like, we make mistakes, we do that. And again, it's committing to that as well and how you can respond to grow. Like, I'd rather have someone make a mistake and then tell me like, thank you for acknowledging that. I'm sorry for the harm I caused. I'm going to commit to do this to make myself even better and kind of build on that too, because that kind of builds on the expectation and building on that and what we can do as well. So thank you for that too. And yeah, that kind of helps kind of navigate what we're doing to ensure that we're moving forward on that. Oh no, Jean's electricity just went out. So we're gonna see if she can call in sometime soon. I apologize, everyone. We are working on that to make sure that we can see. And we are just troubleshooting here, and we're building on that. So
Jonathan, while we wait for her to rejoin, are you comfortable? I'll put it out there. I'm from a small rural community that is very white. And it's the way I've kind of gone about it here, because probably our very white board, if you're just looking at race, does represent our population. So the way I've gone about it, each year when we start the recruitment process, I've gathered data about some of the demographics of the people we serve. So what is the racial, socioeconomic, age, those, and I challenge us to, and we have so much growth to do in this area, but I challenge us to think about recruiting towards some of those demographics, since we're not very diverse racially. I think that's what's coming up in the conversation, but I would love ideas from my peers if we're not able to get Jean back about how you're doing this in your communities.
Yeah, Jean, just come back out if you see the slides. But thank you so much, Alicia, because you're teeing up a conversation we're having later too as well. But just a quick point, diversity looks different for every organization community. So what does it look like to represent your community and build on that too? So yeah, acknowledge that like your population might mostly be white, but what elements of diversity contribute to enhance your organization to the people you serve? Because like it could be your community, but is it similar to the your population that you serve? But Jean's going to go through some data after that, and then we'll have some time to have any more questions on that too as well. Welcome back, Jean.
In the middle of the day, my electricity decided to go off, and then it decided to come back, and here we are. Isn't it a wonderful life? So we wanted to get to the last piece here about identifying options for accountability, which is this, again, I found in a lot of reports.
Oh no, did we just lose her again?
Something has to do with your AFP. Can you see that?
Yep, I can. Yes. Okay. Awesome. So for AFP, both at the global board and local board, we have kind of a tracker that we kind of have kind of organized as well.
Say who AFP is again, just so everybody.
Association of Fundraising Professionals, excuse me. So, we're a global organization with membership chapters all over the globe. And we have this tracker that we give out, and it kind of helps each chapter board kind of keep on track towards IDEA. So we use the language IDEA, so inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And here we have we have kind of the goals, and then we have over here who is responsible for those goals. We have any notes related to it, and then we have where we are. So like a red is like we're at a roadblock, a yellow is it's moving forward, a green is like it's completed and working on that too. But those are just some ways to help keep things accountable, because then you can track it throughout the year or every so often, and then move forward to make sure that you're measuring your goals, you're monitoring the success and what you can kind of do for as well. And then you can identify why things didn't work. So for example, passing a resolution committed to IDEA is a focus as well. Creating a written IDEA plan on the goals and what to work on too as well. Do you have a chair or a committee or someone leading it too? So kind of this is a great tool that you can kind of use to make whatever works for you, so that you feel like you can monitor your success and monitor where you can go from there as well.
So the other idea I want to share with you about data has to do with Outside Magazine. This is way outside the box, so to speak, but it really struck me when I read this. Outside Magazine, as you can see, is about doing things outdoors, and it's usually a lot of, it's a very specific audience who reads this. But every year they put out one. This is just an example of what they do. They put out one called, at the top you can see it's called Best Towns in America. And they do an issue every year. And usually it's somewhere like Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or someplace that, it's beautiful. And people who do outdoor stuff love it, but they either mostly white communities or very rich communities, and, not places a lot of us are going to go. So they rethought it. And they actually worked with Kamal Bell this year. And if you've never heard of Kamal Bell, he's a comedian who's actually done this phenomenal show on CNN. I think you can get it on Hulu now. And it's called United Shades of America. And he, as this kind of interesting commentator, goes out and talks to people. His first show was he went and talked to members of the KKK, but he's talked to people in every community that you can think of, racial, ethnic, religious, and it's just really interesting. So if you get a chance to watch it, I recommend it, because he's just having conversations and he's trying to listen to people who have a different point of life than him. Could be something you could pick out one of these and share with your board members ahead of a meeting and then have a conversation about it. So he got involved. Outside Magazine asked him to come and work with them so they could be more equitable in how they picked the best towns in America to live in, according to Outside Magazine. So I read this and I thought I have to share this with nonprofits, because it has nothing to do with nonprofits, but it's about a process. So what they did, the red arrow says, they identified their people who read the magazine as wanting affordable housing, investment in green initiatives, and a diverse population with access to parks and open space. So they kind of created a persona of who they were talking about. In 2014, their best measures were people who wanted access to adventure, healthy eating, bike lanes. So that was their criteria for that year. In 2018, their criteria was, as it says here, spruced up waterfront, craft beer, commitment to recreation. So every year they just create criteria for their particular issue, the 10 they're going to pick out. Then they have this O score that talks about how they put it into a formula. So I'm just trying to share with you a process, but they switched it to number of outfitters, miles of trails, number of bike shops, their metrics. I'm going to share with you a couple of them, but the number 5 is the one that I think is interesting. Diversity. So they made sure they were looking at cities that were diverse. Sustainable, they wanted cities that had some green initiatives. That was important to them. 3, they wanted to make sure they weren't going to the Jackson Holes of the world, and they were doing cities that were more livable, affordable. And then number 4 that I thought was really fascinating, that's the whole reason I'm sharing this with you, is they looked at outdoor equity, and they defined that as the percentage of each city that consists of parkland and the percentage of residents of color who live within a 10-mile walk of a park. So they didn't just look at one, they looked at two different measures. So what was interesting about doing that is they came up with very different towns. And who came up number 1 the year they did this was Atlanta. And Atlanta came up, if you look in the red circle, the percentage of residents who live within a 10-minute walk of a park, but also the percentage of residents of color who live within a 10-minute walk. So that's what disaggregating the data did, is they said it's not good enough that overall population, if we average the whole city, but we're going to disaggregate and pull out the people of color in this community and see if they have a similar or close to similar opportunity. So Atlanta came out as number one. And the other thing they did, there's in this article, is they connected to a outdoor group that was led by people of color. So like people who are bikers were in Atlanta, and in each city, they got the voice of people who live there. So then another city that came up strong, and this was from Outside Magazine, was Charlotte, North Carolina. So you're kind of like, okay, but look at that. Percent of residents in a 10-minute walk of a park, and percentage of residents of color. So they have separated it out and looked at it differently. And the idea would be, this is what Outside Magazine did. So I can say, if Outside Magazine can do this, then nonprofits can do this. We can start to say, how do we disaggregate our data so that we don't just look at a picture that averages, but we can look at how different people experience. And then the last one in here is, there were about 10, but I want to put Norfolk in here because that's another town that comes out. You wouldn't have thought of that as being on your top list of places to live from Outside Magazine. But again, this was about percentage of residents. So I just thought nothing about this matters except that the idea that disaggregating your data. Sanaya, you have a question or a comment?
I do. Good afternoon. It's Sanaa. Nice to meet you all. I'm a parent liaison here at Ready for School, Ready for Life in Guilford County. And aggregating the data is something that we have been working on intensely. We have, anyway, my question is in regard to how important is it to go as far as possible into separating experiences, or are we lumping still in some way because of the uniqueness of all of the experiences?
So when you say separating experiences, you mean like beyond race, but all the other identities people have, or are you talking about actual lived experience?
Well, that, because we have cultural pockets, right? And then, yes, actual lived experience. Are we considering ACEs? Like, what are some of the things that we look at when we talk about aggregating data? Everyone knows that data can get really intense and very extensive. And then sometimes you kind of lose your trajectory when you drill down too far. But when you don't drill down far enough, all factors are not being considered in a way that makes it truly equitable for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that comes to my mind when you're saying that is, no doubt Outside Magazine got a lot of slack for what they did because they didn't say what you just said. They only picked perhaps people of color versus everything else.
Right.
So some of this, I would say, is you start somewhere and you say to people, it's our first step. We know there's more, but we're going to do it this way this year and see what we learn. And then we're going to expand next year and see what we can learn. Does that go to anything of what you're saying?
It does. It sounds like something that would take time, and certainly funding and a good runway to actually see the end result would be awesome. That's not always an option, but yes, thank you.
Well, and the other idea would be to look at smaller geographic areas rather than your whole service area. And I mean, both of what I'm trying to say is these are ideas that we're starting and we're going to grow. So we're either starting with only measuring a few specific categories, or we're only going to measure one geography as a way to learn from your practice. I mean, Outside Magazine has a lot more money to do this. So clearly they can do it their way, and they could print the magazine when they were ready.
Right.
And they didn't show us all the mistakes they made getting there, but I'm sure they got some slack from people who said you didn't measure this or measure that. And so I think you just need to be confident that what you're doing is the right direction, even though you're only on step one and it might take 8 more steps to get there. Jonathan, you're nodding your head. I don't know if you're thinking of something else or if you're just...
No, I agree. I mean, we wish we could do everything. Like, I want to measure everything and tailor every unique experience too, but that's unrealistic right now, just with our limited capacity, resources, and first of all, the infrastructure to ensure that you can measure all that data effectively and as a, respective and responsible as well. So I think it takes steps. I think it's like where you can scope out like, okay, we're going to focus on this part and then grow from this too, or kind of build on that. Or you search for external support and capacity to help grow it too. Like with any data, like if there's local universities that could help with it too, or other research that could help kind of build on that. What does that look like specifically? So I think, the point for this is like, look at your data differently. Like, when we're thinking, what Alicia just said, like, oh, racial diversity isn't that much in our community, but we're looking at other diversity demographic factors that affect as well. And then if you look at those, then you can look at, intersectionalities or trends within that too, or kind of identify that as well. I think it's just good to make sure that you're incorporating and, not taking data is interpreted how we interpret as well. And it could be used for your good way or a different way, like, and I think it's just a way that we shift in expectations for how we're looking at data to then how to kind of move forward on some of our equity goals.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make. And I also, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow of things. I also think it's very important for parent voice to be involved, just in a way that they can kind of steer the short-term progress from the short-term results. I appreciate you all entertaining my question.
Sure. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking your neck out there. I also see a comment from Maura that talks about adding a diversity paragraph to our bylaws because she's dealing with people being appointed. There are other nonprofits, not yours, who partner with corporations, and the corporations tend to determine who the next person is they're going to send to be on the board because they want to have a relationship with that corporation. I mean, think United Ways. They want to have a relationship out there. So Corporation A sends somebody, and when that person rotates off, they send another person. So the idea is to do kind of what Maura's saying and think of different ways. How can you work with those partners to say, these are our values? We want to be more diverse. If each group just thinks independently of who they're going to send, we could end up with, 5 white men or 5 white women or 5 Black women. So we're trying to look at it as a bigger picture. So when you ask the person who's the representative from Corporation A or from legislature or whatever group you're working with to see the bigger picture when they go back to help work with you, so that it's not just the larger entity making a decision and sending you the next person, but they are aware of some of your values that you're working with and some of the changes you're trying to make. I mean, state legislators, that's political. That's a whole different world. It's not quite as easy, perhaps, as when you're partnering with corporations and they send somebody, or companies, and they send somebody and then rotate and send somebody else. I mean, I think it's a whole different world when you're working with legislators because there's a whole different set of motivations. But if you sit with them and say, like you had said, Maura, we have a diversity paragraph, we share that, we say this is where we're trying to make a difference. We want to make sure we have representation from our community. You're working with another entity and they have to make those decisions. Thank you for adding that, Maura. That was a good comment. All right, so we're going to ask one last challenge. What challenges have we not touched today? Just want to see it in the chat box, or if you want to raise your voice up, we just want to see what challenges have we not touched on. We try to touch on some different challenges. We have a couple more things we're going to do. This is not the end. We have 2 more things we want to share, but we just want to give you a chance in case people had some other challenges. Put it in the chat box and see what pops up. We don't know what we haven't talked about until people throw it in there. Anybody have any challenges? I'm going to continue on and people can put it in the chat box. I'll come back to it. Here's the next thing I want to ask y'all. We talked about 6 ideas. Sense of urgency. How do you work with that? How do you build that sense of urgency? How do you work with that on your side? How do you building a guiding coalition? Adapting kind of your ambassadors, your dream team of people who can help you move things forward. Creating a vision, making statements, sharing those with people, letting everybody understand the changes you're trying to make. But mainly what you're trying to work with is getting your board members behind that. So sometimes it's getting it out in public, but you want to get your board members to understand those statements. Enable action by removing barriers, make it easier for people to step in. Let them have tiny baby steps and be okay with that. Let them have big steps if that's where they are. But the people who are willing to make a step forward, it might be tiny. Help people have common language. Generate short-term wins. So when you do things, make sure you can sit there and go, look, we are making progress. And then number 6, we just talk about the disaggregating data. So those are kind of the ideas we went through. A couple of people put comments in. Maura talked about a challenge. Retired people have time to attend meetings and young mothers do not. So what I say about being on a board is sometimes not everybody can be on your board, but you can still have their voices. You could have a advocacy council. You could have a mothers. They meet at a time for mothers and they give you input into directions you're going to go. And from that, you might make connections of people who in a year or two might be in a position to be on your board. But just the idea that you can have groups of people you connect to on a less regular basis than a board meeting, twice a year, 4 times a year at a different time frame. And then Carrie Ann says, I think it's important to do personal equity work and really think about how we're creating safe space for people to come to the table, not only creating a diverse board, but creating a safe, brave space for that. Yes, that makes sense. I think everybody needs to feel welcome. And that's something you could have a conversation at your board as we move towards trying to be more diverse. What do we need to do to make sure people feel welcome? And sometimes we're not even welcoming the people who are from the dominant groups. Sometimes we're not doing a good onboarding for anybody. Sanaa, I'm saying your name wrong, Sanaa, is that right?
Yes, it's Sanaa.
Sanaa. Okay, this is where community alignment comes in handy. Parents to agency, yes, parents on boards, parents as leaders. And just remember, you don't always have to put somebody on your board to have them be in an important position. Boards are big commitment and long, business meetings. And maybe what you want is to connect to your parents in a way that allows them just to focus on a smaller piece of the organization, which is the program or how they are, how they can help other clients or recipients. And that's great. You have something you want to say, Sanaa?
Yes, in our Guilford Parent Leader Network, for example, we actually do choose parent leaders to sit on the board. They also have an opportunity to sit on different committees, finance committee, governance committee, the equity action committee. And so what that means is it does put them in a position to also be leaders and kind of steer the direction of how things are going. But in addition to that, they slowly create jobs for parents to also become part of the staff after all of that experience. And now they can create real change. So I think that it's very important to consider the aspects of your community, but also to include parents specifically as we shape what's coming next with our children in the future.
So I want to share with you an inspirational piece to end this with. And I don't know if any of you know who Dawn Staley is. I hope some of you do, but you probably have to follow women's college basketball. Basically, she is the coach of the University of South Carolina, and she just won the national championship this year. And it's the second time. She won it the first time in 2017. So she is the coach. She is very aware that she's an African-American coach, a female coach in a field that doesn't have a lot of Black African-American women coaches. And she understands that role. So this picture was taken from when she won in 2017. And, they get up there and cut the net, and she has those pieces of net in her hand. And what she did is she trimmed off little pieces and sent one to every other Black woman coach in the country and said, this is for you. And she was trying to inspire all them. And I tell you all that because I want you to pay attention to her, because I think she's going to be a voice. She's going to be bigger than a coach. She's using her platform in a really wise way, because you get a platform when you win a national championship. She made a statement that I'm going to share with you. And I think if you're going to be leaders in diversity in your organization, you need to think about this. And her statement is, I'm comfortable in my skin, and I'm comfortable being uncomfortable and making other people uncomfortable when it's for the right thing. So what she's doing is she's pushing the edge around all the coaches. And so sometimes she makes other coaches uncomfortable because she calls it out. She says the truth, things that other people didn't talk about. And she makes people uncomfortable. But I think this is the best piece of advice that you can hear from Dawn Staley, is to be comfortable in your own skin. So figure out what makes you get stuck about talking about this, and look at it and own it, and own where you get stuck. It's okay. We all get stuck. Just own where you get stuck, because then you're being comfortable with your own skin, and understand that you're making other people uncomfortable, but own that too, because that's part of you moving people forward. If we're never uncomfortable, we're not going to change. So you just got to live with the fact that it's sooner or later, you're going to make people uncomfortable. Just those of us who are from the South, we can just, my sister taught me this, you smile and wave. When you do something bad in a car, you smile and wave, you don't do the mean kind of wave, you do this. You're going to make people uncomfortable, but it's for the right thing. So that's what you want to think about. So these ideas that we just shared with you, we would be curious if you would be willing. Gina, you know who she is. That's great. I think everybody's going to know her name after this, and I hope you pay attention, because I think she's going to change I think she's using her platform well. Dawn Staley. Put in the chat box, which one of these is going to stick with you? Of these 6 ideas we talked about, which one is going to kind of get you going, be your next first step? Just put the number in, 1 through 6. I just want to see what people are taking away. Generating short-term wins. A lot of people like that one, Jonathan. See,
Yeah, it keeps the momentum going.
yeah. Create a sense of urgency. How can you light a fire under people and help them see? A lot of people like those short-term wins. I think I saw number 2, build a guiding coalition. And removing barriers, helping people, help people. Sometimes I keep this visible to share with people. We've got to think of the carrot and the stick. And too often we get stuck on the stick, and you got to think, how can I help people move forward? How can I make it easy for them and not be angry because they're not? So carrot or the stick, even though you aren't satisfied anymore, you have to keep offering carrots for people. So my final word was about Dawn Staley and your inspiration. Do you have final words, Jonathan? Or do you want to let her, free to go here? What do you want?
I would just it's a journey. Keep it going. It's going to take forever. And, but you can, that's the urgency to start now and do whatever you can to move forward as well.
So Jonathan and I were very happy. I'll put our emails up here, or they're in the, I thought I put them on the slide. We're very happy if you want to follow up with a question with us. If you had a concern, if you didn't like how we said something, anything you want to do, we're willing to continue this conversation with anybody. I think our emails might be in the initial material. And is there something that you want to do at the end, Jessica or Ren?
Yes, I just need to make an announcement for our raffle winner. So first, I'd like to say thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it. I like, I have to go to so many sessions, but this is one that I really definitely appreciate, and it is more, not that they're not all dear to my heart, but one that is close to the work that we do at my office. So thank you. We are taking feedback for each of the different sessions. So we will be posting surveys. So if you haven't taken yesterday's survey, we'll post that in the chat, and we will also post a survey for today. So at the end of the day, when we have just one session left. So if this is your last session of the day, please fill out the survey. We appreciate your feedback. If you still have another session to attend, we do have a sponsorship session at 11:45. Please consider taking that survey at the end of that session. Ren is posting them in the chat right now. Additionally, I'd like to announce the winner. Lakeshore Early Learning, one of our sponsors, provided sponsorship gifts for us to raffle off. So we have Fill and Roll Bumpy Balls from Lakeshore Early Learning, and our winner is from the Catawba County Partnership for Children, and it's Leslie Farrell. So Leslie, congratulations, you are the winner. We have your email address, and we'll be in contact with you for an address to send the balls to you. So congratulations. And again, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Jean.
Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Go make some things happen.
Thank you all. Have a good day.